G'day, mate. 40 here with Dovid. Interesting story about social media. So, in the Orthodox Jewish community, if someone is not willing to give his wife a get, that there are sustained campaigns of public shaming. Yet, some of these sustained campaigns of public shaming run against terms of service for various social media companies. So, we've got the story here. Get, meaning divorce refuser, Dovid Wasserman silences social media campaign that brought awareness to plight of Agunah. Agunah means chained woman, a woman who can't get a divorce. So she married his wife Nahama in 2004. They have 3 children. They separated in September of 2014. He's apparently refused to give his wife a get for a divorce, Jewish divorce, for almost 7 years. And so his wife can't get married in an Orthodox Jewish ceremony. Any thoughts on this case, Dovid?
Yeah, I was looking at it, Mick. I check Fuss's Knives pretty regularly, and I thought there were a lot of interesting things. But I forwarded to you most specifically because of the censorship angle, and it was related to things we talked about before quite a bit. Specifically like group strategy, most specifically, and Tanya Gersh and Richard Spencer's mother, and the concept of is it a Jewish thing to do to go after someone's family? And possibly group conflict strategy, where you meant like Anglos or certain people who would look at it like, okay, whatever, what's this have to do with a person's family? That whatever they did doesn't give you the right to go after their family. And I thought it was related to that. And then you see also, because this is an ironic case, because like generally get refusers are universally hated by everybody. There's no real fan club for get refusers. Although the first time we talked, God forbid, we talked about child molestation or moiser going outside of the community to deal with problems inside of the Haredi community. And so get refusal also, like within the Haredi community, they could look at it differently in terms of divorce is highly frowned upon. The more modern Orthodox, you could just, it didn't work out, I'm going to get divorced, as opposed to the Haredi. People get divorced, but usually rabbis would be much more strict and strenuous to encourage people to stay married. So things like get refusal might be looked at different in the more Haredi community. But like for modern Orthodox, this became like one of the biggest issues. And so here you have this case where they're trying to publicly embarrass this guy, which according to Jewish law is the way you're supposed to handle it. And so we talk about like group strategy, and here is the Orthodox Jewish court trying to enforce something the way that our tradition says that we should go about doing it, but we're doing it with the goyim in a secular world where people are looking at it. And so from this angle, this guy said that these rabbis are bullying me, and they had their Instagram post taken down. So Luke Ford knows censorship, probably a international expert, and especially decades of blogging controversial topics. So this seemed ironic, like cancel culture, that you wouldn't think that cancel culture is so concerned with protecting a get refuser. There's no way the leftist social media people are all concerned about defending some Orthodox Jewish male get refuser. But you see cancel culture is like they probably don't really like these rabbis, and they probably don't, just look at it as like this is just dumb, and use it as an excuse to ban people. And you see that's, me and Charles Moskowitz, me and Luke have discussed this multiple times and mentioned like the group strategy. Jews in general are probably pro censorship, and that's the approach that most Jewish organizations and even your average Jew on the street, just if you polled your average Jew, they probably feel like censorship is probably a pretty good idea. That's probably the best way to handle this. And me and Luke have analyzed the issue from a larger perspective, say like, no, censorship is probably not such a good idea. And like our Jewish brethren, our Jewish friends, we understand why they take the path and approach of censorship and are trying to make a greater argument that like it really doesn't work. It's not a good idea. And so I thought this case really, highlights that where it's just like, it's great, like this get refuser is the reason why these rabbis are getting censored.
Right. So many different angles to take on this, but I think you'll find in many different surveys on opinions on free speech that the average Jew on the street is actually far more in favor of free speech than non-Jews. Jews more than any other group, according to surveys, favor free speech, and they are more reluctant to fire teachers who may have said something racist, and they're more reluctant to impose censorship. Though in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, in particular, censorship has been a way of life when rabbis have had awesome power to control their community. Now, there's an aspect of get shaming. So a get, once again, is an Orthodox Jewish divorce, and the typical tactic in Orthodox Judaism is that when someone refuses to give his wife a get, there's almost nothing that you can't do. I mean, you have cases of Orthodox Jewish men.
Rabbi Mendel Cowprad Epstein. Yeah, sorry for interrupting, but like like the famous Rabbi Cowprad Epstein.
Right. There's virtually nothing that Orthodox Jews won't do to convince someone that he needs to give his wife a get, a Jewish divorce, because without it, she's effectively a chained woman. So it's not been uncommon in Jewish history for Jews to get together and to beat someone until he says, yes, I want to give a get. And so the most common tactic is social shaming. So his address will get publicized in the Jewish community, and there will be marches and protests outside of where he lives. So the traditional Jewish communities does absolutely everything possible to make the man's life a misery. Now, I hate that. Like, I don't think people should be protesting outside someone's home. That really goes against my inclinations, because I'm aware of frequently how corrupt the process can be. I don't know if there's, say, a particular Beit Din that he's willing to give a get through, but there's another Beit Din where he's not willing to give the get, and I don't know who's more corrupt, which of the two Bate Din are more corrupt. So I don't like the idea of taking this to people's homes, because then you could start extending that to anyone. You could take that to the communal rabbi who rules something that gets people outraged. You could do it to rabbis who participate in a Beit Din. There's just no end of social dislocation that you can inflict. So it's also a really bad look for the Orthodox Jewish community, I think, to be targeting people at their homes. Any thoughts, Dovid?
Yeah, I was shocked, actually. I mean, I wasn't shocked because, like you, I've seen it many times, and I've seen protests for get refusers, and even people I know that like get relatively worked up because like liberal Jews, like my liberal rabbi, getting arrested over poor people's rights or Black Lives Matter or something like that, and the right wing Orthodox Jews just like, that's like dumb, like who would ever do that? But like when it came to a get protest, like people were all worked up and like they were out there protesting. So see, like it was almost like Purim or something, like people turn into charity collectors, and you see the strategy from a certain point, like it was like I understood it made sense that the people were doing, but like relatively that as a strategy, people would be more worked up over one thing over another. So I mean, maybe it makes sense, because you look at like these women are part of the community and they want to move on, and you see how tight knit the community is, where they would communally gather together, really just for the sake of one member, and so from some perspective, you could see is commendable, and the kind of like cultish tight knit level where the community would do something that they basically never do, like only like Iran, like like Orthodox Jews might go out and protest if like they thought Israel was going to be destroyed by Iran or something like that, but for the sake of getting a man to give his wife a get, that's basically the only thing else that Orthodox Jews will ever protest for. So it is like a huge thing within the religion, and from like a Bezdin or the rabbis, of that's probably one of the main thing that a lot of these rabbis are caught up in dealing, and it's an important part for the community. A lot of times it's kept down on the low. When I used to work in synagogues, sometimes people would tell me information or something, and the rabbis would deal with things in different ways, like God forbid, even like known criminals, thieves, child molesters. And some synagogues, those people are allowed to come in and pray, keep an eye on them. Some places, I really didn't go to places that actively had people, and if that guy tries to come in, don't keep him out, because like an Orthodox synagogue, it's a house of God, and if you really believe, you basically got to let those guys in. But like if you're trying to run a culture successfully, you have to have some way of dealing with it. And historically, like God forbid, the Rabbi Epstein beating people, there is the nature in that, and you saw that it was major rabbis. Rabbi Epstein, Rabbi Woolmark went to prison. Those were serious rabbis caught up in Orthodox culture, and there probably was a certain element of the Orthodox rabbis at a point that were like, you got to beat this guy up to give him a get. That's what our books say historically, and that's when you question like Adam Green and Vince Bruno and the Noahide laws, where you say, well, your books say that you're supposed to behead us because we're idol worshippers. And so the one point, at least maybe because it's internal, the rabbis feel like, okay, like we're beating up a fellow Jew, but like God forbid, you see that is something part of the religion. It's probably a way that Jews internally had handled something, and then the shaming culture, where it makes sense to extend Jewish culture to the internet, and so what better thing to use the internet than to publicly shame, like it's a mitzvah really to some extent, but like the culture, the cultural difference, and even were you surprised that Vossesnais was surprised, or you think they're called like anti-Semitism or something, like Instagram's anti-Semitic because they took the side, because both sides are Jewish here, like there can't be anti-Semitism.
I'm not surprised because Wasserman is an Orthodox Jewish publication, and so they're going to see things from an insular point of view. It's not surprising to me at the same time that Instagram and social media companies would rightly regard this as bullying. Now, this is bullying. That is the dumb thing in Orthodox Judaism. This is what you do to someone who won't give a divorce, won't give a get. But this Orthodox Jews in America live in a wider society. So wider society has institutions that frown on this. I mean, this is kind of similar to revenge porn. This is doxing. So the Orthodox Jewish community often participates in doxing to keep their own in line, but the wider community and its institutions don't have to approve it and go along with it. So generally speaking, the Orthodox Jewish community tends to get what it wants, and these people who refuse to give a get, their lives are made miserable.
Yeah, and this might be a different case, missing if it's the question from Jewish law: does this guy have a right to keep his wife chained? And technically, yeah, the law is designed that way, that this guy does have a hold on his wife's ability to have Jewish children, and should he not give his consent, God forbid, and she goes on to her kids would be mamzerim and illegitimate, and it's biblically the man is, so to say, given that right, and whatever the situation, but I don't in this case, God forbid, he said, like, he just she left him, and he was like, no, I want you back. I'm not granting the divorce. And it wasn't something he did wrong. It's a question of the spirit of Jewish law. Does he technically have that right? And even the question of forcing a get in modern society, say in Israel, they legally can imprison people. In even New York, there's quite a bit of legal pressure they could impose upon a person, and it's actually probably one of the major, like Mitzitza Bal Peh, that if you're on the Jewish lobbying side of trying to deal with the government, Mitzitza Bal Peh is one of the more common issues that people had to deal with, because government wanted to restrict it, and there was a sizable amount of Jews that wanted to do it. And the same thing with the get refusal, because there's enough Jews that there's hundreds, thousands of these women, and they have varying cases, and there's different opinions on rabbis about divorce. So, like I said, in the Haredi community, like divorce is really like the last option, and saying that if she just realized that she didn't love this man, and like he didn't beat her, he didn't do anything wrong, she just decided like she didn't love him anymore, he technically, probably according to Jewish law, has the right to keep her chained. I mean, that's the spirit of the law, right?
Yeah, I would have to know more. It's a complicated
The
issue.
modern sense is that you can't say something that politically incorrect. They say it's the man's right to reject her ability to marry another man. And of the compelling, you said like, no, she found another man. And like there was a case the other week where this guy had like remarried, and he was just inflicting pain upon his wife for no good reason, as opposed to this case, if the man was saying like, no, he demands that he still loves his wife and wants her back, and he didn't do anything wrong, and she does not have the right as a Jewish woman to a divorce if he did nothing wrong. And probably historically, or even in a Haredi perspective, that might be the Jewish law. Like the woman doesn't have a right to divorce, and especially if he did nothing wrong. So in this case, it could be more complicated, and you could see a difference. And here, the family, they're going after the guy and the guy's family. So the videos posted on it. The police arrested and put restraining orders on the people trying to force a get. And I think this case would show like in the modern Orthodox community, you couldn't even fathom those words. But in the Haredi community, you say like, this man, he's not trying to remarry, and it's literally his right to keep his wife chained. And I don't know if you thought much about the issue, or if you agree with me that it's been revised in a revision way, but in a historical perspective, you say that no, it is his right.
I just don't know enough. I mean, I know that what you're saying, that's one thread of the story. And I also know that the rabbis have traditionally moved heaven and earth to try to release women from these situations. I want to play a little bit of a video here where the guy who won't give a divorce, his mother is confronted. So.
Good evening. I'm sorry, we're just here to make a little announcement. This Rebbitzin Wasserman over here has been asked many, many times by Bezdin, many times, to come down to Bezdin because her son Dovid refuses to give his wife a get for 4 years. 4 years, Rebbitzin Wasserman's son will not give his wife a get. Rebbitzin Wasserman was asked by Bezdin to come many, many times, and she ignores. It's before Rosh Hashanah. You're allowed to listen, Rebbitzin. I'm leaving very shortly. Rebbitzin Wasserman, we ask you before Elul, please, maybe don't, give your son so much love and all the other things that come along with what you give him to support him. We would like to get. We are going to do whatever we need to do. This will be back next week. We will be back next week.
Okay, when this guy says we'll do whatever we need to do, well, you then, if you break secular law, you run against secular norms in America, you then also have to face the consequences.
Like I'm
I'll say a little more. So they eventually call the police.
She was asked to come to Bezdin.
Can I ask you a question? What would you do if it was your daughter?
What would you do? What would you do?
In my house
Look at all these Rebbitzins holding their ears.
So
Rebbitzin Wasserman, you have anything to say about this? I'm just curious if you have anything to say about this.
What's
Really? We went to Bezdin.
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 She was asked to come to Bezdin.
You're sitting here before Rosh Hashanah. You come out of your way to come to a shir from a woman whose son comes there for all support.
So based in is a Jewish law court, and there's not usually just one in a community. So perhaps the wife wants the man here to come before one particular based in, and he may want her to come before another.
Help for money, and
the thing they're not mentioning is saying what they should be trying to do is encourage them to get back together. If there's no permanent breach, and she just fell out of love with him, and like he didn't beat her or cheat on her or anything like that, then saying no, she should be encouraged to get back together with her husband for the sake of her kids, and because divorce isn't something to be taken lightly. And then you say from a modern Orthodox perspective, it's like divorce is something to be taken lightly, and say encourage the guy to give a get, and you guys say that's an avera. You say it's a mitzvah to try to bring peace between a man and his wife, and so from their perspective, they might actually say like, no, she's making the mistake, and what she should be doing is getting back with her husband, and that's the element that they're saying that it really doesn't fly in current liberal American society, and probably why people are so anti-Haredi, anti-Orthodox, because that probably is what they would be saying is like, no, what you need to do is get back together with your husband. We don't care if you love him or not. That's not grounds for a divorce if he didn't actually do anything significantly wrong.
Okay, let me play more from this.
Many times, many different bases, and she refuses. You need to tell your son he has to give Nechama Esther a get. And until that happens, we will be back, and we will be back, and we will be back.
Shia's business, Yocheved's business, we'll go after everybody, every single one of you. You should all be ashamed of yourself. You should all be ashamed of yourself. You're sitting in here by a Rebbetzin. She's not a Rebbetzin. She's just looking for covered. And Bezdin,
Covet means honor.
requested her to come, she does not show up.
She was
You
requested.
guys should all be ashamed of yourself.
She was requested to
I
come to
appreciate
Bezdin and
it.
didn't
It's
come.
very
What's
sad.
the point in coming to the shir?
I
Why do you come to a
appreciate
shir?
Thank
What
you
do you
so
think?
much.
She's a fake. She's
No,
a
all you are fakes.
Her own
All you are
self-image.
fakes. All you are fakes. Come in here.
God, they're gonna rip them
Rebbetzin
up, pick them back,
Wasserman,
and put them
we
in
will be
the
back.
No, leave them.
We will be back.
So incredible levels of verbal hostility in these kind of exchanges, but no one's frightened of physical violence. That's quite rare. But Jews can kick it up verbally, emotionally, to a level of intensity that is more rare in non-Jewish culture. But no one there is frightened of physical violence. Any thoughts, David?
I wouldn't be sure that that's true. Like those guys might have beat her son up. Those guys may have already beat her son up multiple times. Even you don't know the case, so it could be like no, those people are dangerous people. Those people might have beaten that woman's son up multiple times, and that's so you don't know the information there. And I wouldn't assume that they wouldn't beat his son up in this case. That certainly hot-tempered Jews of any case of beating someone up that they would likely to do it would be a get refusal because there's precedence. We know that Rabbi Epstein historically it's in our books. So no, I would disagree in that situation. There probably is reason to be fearful of violence.
Well,
even among Orthodox Jews.
The women don't demonstrate any fear of violence there. Now, of
Oh
course,
yeah, they wouldn't hit those women. But I'm saying, like, I would if you told me that those very people in those video had beaten that woman's son up in the past multiple times, like I could just guess that from watching the video. But you said like no, those guys would never hit a woman in that scenario. Like those guys could beat up her son and still be accepted in the Orthodox community. They wouldn't if they hit any of those women. That would be beyond the pale.
Yeah. And even beating the son up would still be relatively rare. You don't have that much physical violence in Orthodox Judaism, though it does happen on occasion. Let's get another video here, 45
Rabbi.
seconds.
Your kid goes here?
Yeah.
Another one has just been given.
So more pressure put on for this guy to give his wife a divorce.
Your kid goes to this?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So they're doing everything they can to shame the family so that the son gives the divorce.
at large. Oh, that's
What I mean is it? These people are probably doing it at the behest of the
Do I know you?
rabbinic
You
court.
haven't said
So it's
one
saying
word
it's not
to me.
just like
You haven't asked me
it could be
anything.
from
That's
what I saw in the article. Both
not
of
on
those
our
people are
property.
probably rich, and so that might be making a difference. That she actually has money to hire people to do that. But it appears that these people actually have like some sort of document from the court, and so to say they're serving a duty. And so from a certain perspective, this is what social media should be used for. This is a right from the court, and we had this discussion about Tanya Gersh, where going after Richard Spencer's mother, is it fair game or not? But in this case, yeah, it would appear so that the rabbinic court said it's fair to shame this man's family, that if they see any of this man's family or the people helping him in public, that they should publicly shame them, and they should use social media to spread it. And it's kind of like stopantisemitism.com. If you look at it's kind of like an exact parallel to what they do to an anti-Semite, because it's kind of our strategy that's how we go about it. But in this case, if you're social media and you're saying no, I have a written right from the court that I need to publicly shame this person to give this person a get. So I need YouTube so I could post these videos to embarrass him. And so YouTube is saying what you're going to get in the way of a directive of the rabbinic court, and obviously YouTube, are they around to document public shaming? But obviously, yeah, that's what, if you take it to the larger culture, that's the main thing that YouTube and media is used for, is to publicly shame bad guys. So here in this case, it's kind of it's gotten so out of control that social media has taken the side of like one of the most agreed upon public villains in American culture, the get refuser, in order to censor the Orthodox rabbinic court. So it's almost ironic.
Yeah, so many different angles on this story. So social media may well ban some of these posts, but they have a hard time keeping up with the flood. Now, you mentioned that the people are operating under the direction of rabbinic court, and you also said rabbinic court. So in all likelihood, they're operating under the direction of one rabbinic court, and it's not unheard of for one rabbinic court to clash with another rabbinic court. I don't know if that's true in this case, but I know that it's true in other cases like this, that you have one
I'm pretty sure he
court
said in the
saying one thing.
video. Pretty sure he said in the video that he had multiple courts that had ruled it, and he probably has a
Interesting.
paper. I mean, he might even have a paper that he's handing out that has like the signatures of a bunch of rabbis, because I mean that's how we do it. So I mean that's but yeah, it could be multiple rabbinic courts ruling differently, and it could be, you know, this case, like money being involved, you might make it more, you know, why are there so many people trying to come to the aid of this woman? And you know, so the article mentions like she's from a rich family, so like obviously you know, there's a little bias within the Jewish community, and money is probably, you know, right up there with one of the most likely things that the Jewish community would be biased for.
Right. Okay. What's been going on your Sunday weekend review show with Jen?
It's been getting pretty good, but we've taken a different direction where it's kind of philosophy, spirituality. Not many Jews anymore. You know, Root and Branch in Jerusalem might be coming back, but we haven't done that for like a month. The Les Glassman, I think he finished sitting Shiva, and the other guy, Lowell Gallen, I'm not exactly sure, but I think we're going to start back up in April. So we kind of have a eclectic group of people who like science and spirituality. So yesterday we talked for like hours about the Aryan invasion theory, and we're even going over things like 3D printing and in science. And it took quite a while to get an audience of people interested in it, because you know, to be like I you know, like you suffer lower viewership to talk about what you want to talk about. So we went on for a few months, you know, this year, trying to take it more science, technical, spiritual, and we probably suffered viewership, and you know, even people like Brundle or Half Galitzian, you know, like complaining. But God forbid you got to drop the people. Saying like if you're not a performer, I'm not a performer. So I think that the move has being successful. The largest, we're in a position now where we're starting to get new people who want to come on, and we're, it's funny though, like the biggest problem is people's sound stocks, and like people come on, they're smart, they want to stream, and they really have like, I mean, thanks for buying me the microphone, but like, thank God. But it's like people like they can't stream because they really have bad sound quality, and they can't figure a way out how to get their sound together.
Yeah, I mean that is the number one most frustrating issue, bringing people onto a stream. It's far more important that people have good quality sound than good quality picture. So people can't seem to figure out how to have decent sound quality.
Yeah, even it's better they have good sound quality than even something interesting to say, because like it doesn't matter how smart a person, if their sound quality isn't good, no one's going to watch it. And I don't know, like a year of Zoom, maybe people didn't think like, oh, you know, if you're doing Zoom from the house, you wonder like, do people just have bad sound quality, or did you know, like millions of people buy nice microphones across the country? My guess is they probably just have poor sound quality. Maybe like a school or teaching, the teacher has good equipment, but from what I see, like, no, that's not the case. You know, even dealing with Root and Branch and Charles Moskowitz, and I was mentioning also, like, I read in your book, and like, God forbid, I had seen like some of those movies as a kid with that woman, you know, that you Kitten Natividad, God forbid, and I was saying like that my whole life I have helped people out with their computers. I was naturally good at it, and people all the time ask me, can you help me with the computer? And I did it, and I still do it, and people are really bad at listening. So like Charles Moskowitz, I got Jennifer, she was willing to help him out for free with his stuff, but it's probably going to be hard or near impossible, because a person, like especially an older person, they can't do it. They can't just sit there and listen, like hit this button, do this. do that, and even like with Lowell, is that like, you know, like if you get him to hit like one or two buttons, and then he'd tell like a 10-minute story, and then like we get him to hit like one or two more buttons and saying, but if he could just listen, we could have done it all in a few minutes. And so I honestly, I don't really get it. Like I say, cognitive dissonance, people have issues, but for me, I'm pretty good with technology, and I'm willing to help people. Like even Jennifer, like she helps tons of people. We spend hours and hours, you know, offline or various things, like just helping people with sound and getting their tech together. And there's a lot of people that I wanted to help, and they really just didn't have the focus power to concentrate for me to explain how they did it. And like, I mean, God forbid I read your books and I saw even like some of the secret of some of your success was doing computer work for people. So I thought you might find that interesting.
Yeah, that's important, because even JF Garapi, he was far more successful when he had a variety of people on his show, but he got so worn down by trying to help people with particularly their sound quality, that he's gone his own way the past few months. He's just been doing solo shows because he felt so exhausted trying to work with people and help them with their sound quality. He was just enough. I think a year or two ago he decided, just enough. I'm not gonna work with anyone anymore on their sound quality. Either people have it together or they don't. And now he doesn't want to deal with educating people on understanding YouTube's terms of service. There seems to be a trend among many live streamers that the reason that they have so few guests, if any, is just because the enormous amount of aggravation trying to educate people on how to do elementary things like fix their sound quality.
You just mentioned what I mentioned like Dr. Fauci in the White House when Biden administration took over. For a month, they weren't showing the slides, and they had comments turned off probably because so much trolling. You couldn't even put like a comment that you can't see the slides, and you would see Dr. Fauci or the Jewish woman now that gives the few time a week press conference, be like, next slide, and you couldn't see it. And this is the White House, and it was like a month like that. And the John Hopkins webpage, like it was the same thing. I'm watching, even sometimes like Harvard, they can't even figure out a screen share. It's like it's Harvard and they can't do screen share. And like I went to some of these institutes and I said, like, no, these people are really incompetent. They have ego issues. They're incapable of listening. And like it's Indian people that do it. And so like I know my local, like Hare Krishna temple has better tech than the White House. And that's why, like I say, like I'm a libertarian. I don't trust the government. And like it didn't surprise me that for a month Dr. Fauci was saying next slide, and the screen share wasn't working.
Now there's a comment in the chat which I'm going to respond to first, and then I'm going to ask Dovid for his opinion. Frank writes, Luke, would you have Dovid be more specific regarding Richard Spencer's mother? Did he say it was acceptable to go after her? So I'm going to answer this first. I think Dovid was simply saying that that's inevitably going to happen. That is how the world works, that if you are sufficiently controversial or you alienate enough people, then people who want to get back at you are going to look for your weak points, and often they will look to go after your family. So we could decry it from morning until night, but that is how the world works. People, if they are sufficiently angry at you, will look for your weakest points, and frequently that will mean going after your family. Dovid, any thoughts?
Yeah, and I mentioned, like she could probably do a victory lap. I saw she's actually, maybe it already happened. She spoke in Detroit at a synagogue and, basically given a heroine's welcome. And, that was only on Zoom. But, yeah, she would probably be hailed as a hero. And you're saying there's millions of Jews. And there's a lot of Jews that, people don't even know they're Jewish, or they don't even know they're Jewish till they deal with anti-Semitism and will come out. And it's probably largely our collective strategy that there will be large portions of the Jewish community that look like we really beat Richard Spencer bad, and we'll hold up this woman Tanya Gersh as our hero who did it, and maybe that could be a good or a bad thing, and it's probably a combination of the strategy of historically just how Jews go about dealing with being a minority or anti-Semitism, historically the strategy that we've developed, and also the way the U.S. legal system works. Because really it was the SPLC that used this woman. The SPLC can't independently ruin the lives of people. They need an actual person to bring a lawsuit against them. So, like if the case, like if someone really, really wanted to ruin Luke Ford's life, God forbid, or you're doing controversial stuff, they would need a name and a person who was willing to sue you. And that, probably happened to you a few times. So if it comes down, like, yes, Tanya Gersh is the person who took them down because she is the person that allowed the SPLC to use her for a lawsuit. And she will probably be hailed as a hero by the larger Jewish community.
And what's been going on with your weekly shows with Charles Moskowitz?
He took 2 weeks off, and it's funny. Everyone thought it was because of that argument,
right?
Where he was like, "You're an anti-Semite," and I was like, "No, you're the anti-Semite." I was like, "You're like, that's." But it's like every single time I go to synagogue for 20 years, like I don't think Charles got upset that like I called him an anti-Semite. He called me an anti-Semite. Like most of my friends in synagogue, we've been talking like that for 20 years now. God forbid. And it turns out, I guess, one of his other guests said some anti-vax thing, and he got a 7-day suspension. So, so we should be back this week. And he actually had Dr. Shaw or something, one of his regular guests, who is kind of a skeptic. I think he has a NYU or a reasonably good educational background, but he said something skeptical of the vaccine, and he immediately got a 7-day strike.
And in Los Angeles, things are opening back up. Fewer people are wearing masks outside. There's a sense of life rapidly returning to normal. I got vaccinated on Thursday. What's the situation around you in Detroit?
I mean, my mother is supposed to get her second shot, although she doesn't have a direct appointment because she, it wasn't like her direct. She had an opportunity to get the first shot and she took it. It wasn't like the direct, because the direct sign up, even she was supposed to wait to get her first shot. So there's inefficiency. People are upset. Governor Whitmer, Michigan's one of the states lagging in the vaccination. I'm not exactly sure what's going on. Cases are ticking up. My guess is there will be a fourth wave, at least in infections and numbers. And hopefully the death and severe sickness will be much less. And from a certain perspective, there's no reason to assume that this March and April are going to be any different than last year, besides the fact of the 20-30% of the population that's already vaccinated and has already had it. But that still leaves like 50, 60, 70% of the population that's susceptible to it. Hopefully the vaccinations are the more older or vulnerable people. And so in all likelihood, you say there will be a fourth wave in the next 2 months. We might see not necessarily all new high numbers, but there will be a tick up in numbers. And the hope is that death and serious sickness will remain lower. And then in that case, like Biden says, July 4th, we could have small gatherings in our backyard. In Israel, there's mixed data. Like Israel, it's really sad. Saying like the experts we're going to be partial lockdowns probably for the next 3 years. You're saying like until there's global herd immunity, there's probably going to be outbreaks and partial shutdowns and travel restrictions. And even if the U.S., Biden's right and we had herd immunity by the end of the summer, there's still going to probably be global outbreaks or pocket outbreaks that they might keep a lockdown for a long time. So I'm pretty uncertain. I think people are ready. God forbid, that's why I say we're probably going to have a fourth wave, because like in the Jewish community and the regular Detroit community, the snow just melted. Today it's back down to 40 degrees, but it had been 70 degrees. People are going to get together and get back to normal. And it's like, okay, the vaccine, Trump is gone, and all this, that we're probably going to have a fourth wave. And if Dr. Fauci and the experts are telling, we don't even know how well the vaccine is going to work. So at this point, saying best case scenario is the vaccine works. There's another wave of high case outbreak, but it doesn't kill that many people. And when it hits summer, we could partially be back together. But even the University of Michigan, you're saying we're going to open back for business in the fall in the university. But even like Harvard and the other elite schools, I don't think they've made those announcements. Like saying like you're looking at like the biggest brains, the most knowledgeable experts on it, the elite universities, they haven't even confirmed that they're going back to normal for the fall semester. So I would say there's a high amount of uncertainty, and so that's really all we could say about it. Like, it's in Hashem's hand, and it shows the limitedness of human power, that our greatest minds really can't beat this virus.
Now, will you take the vaccine first chance?
No, I would take it if it was pushed upon me, but no, I'm not going to try to get in line. I don't like vaccines. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I'm not excited about taking it. And if we reach herd immunity before I get the vaccine, which is very possible, because in my early 40s, with relatively good health, no comorbidities, I'm near the end of the line. I'm in the 90th percentile. I'm not exactly sure, but when I put my name in, they said I was literally 90% of that there was going to be a while. So if May comes and they open up to everybody, I will probably not be one of the first people in line. If I'm encouraged, if my parents really want me to do it, I'll do it. But if they reach herd immunity, the caseload becomes very small. I would probably not get the vaccine and just go back to life and risk it. That if I got it and it killed me, God forbid, I would take that risk. I'm not sure about, is that how you look at it?
Oh, I took the vaccine first chance possible. So I took it on Thursday, and I'm coming back for my next shot in 2.5 weeks. Now,
I'm more a loner. I mean, you could say the ability to be back in social situations may mean more to you, and you might have a few more years on me to be more concerned about what would happen to you. I don't want to catch you. I'm just saying that I would, if comes the summer and there's only 100 new cases a day in Michigan, and they're not pushing for people to get the vaccine, I probably won't take it. But I would take it. I'm not against it, and if I'm encouraged or it comes my turn, I will take it.
But you're not terribly concerned about getting COVID in the first place because you don't have any comorbidities, correct?
I'm very concerned. I'm always extremely cautious and saying no, I don't want this disease. But I don't really want a vaccine. Honestly, I understand the vaccine, but no, I don't want them putting I don't want the vaccine, honestly. I would take it because I don't want to hurt people, and I believe vaccines probably work. But no, I don't honestly, I'm skeptical, and I'm cautious, and I'm conspiratorial when it comes to vaccines. Not to the point I wouldn't take it. I'd encourage people to take it. I think that they work. But if it was just looking at it, I don't want to take a vaccine for no reason. So for that purpose, if it looks like COVID has passed us and I'm not likely to get it, and we've already hit herd immunity, I wouldn't take the vaccine. But saying if it comes where you're saying everyone's going to have to get vaccinated, we're not sure if we're hitting herd immunity.
Okay, I got you. Let me just run some things by you. I just want to read to you a couple of sentences from an introduction to Carl Schmitt's book, The Concept of the Political. And Professor Tracy Strong here is a political philosopher. I'll just read you a few sentences, get your reaction to this thinking. An intellectual consequence of the experience with Nazism was to effectively shrink, perhaps one might say homogenize, the language and terms of political debate in the subsequent period. And the revival of interest in Carl Schmitt is consequent to this increasing distance from the 1930s. So what do you think about this idea that the things we could say and the terms of political debate were shrunk and homogenized following World War II as a reaction to Nazism and the Holocaust?
Definitely. I mean, unquestionably, and probably to the detriment, because people felt that if you could stop people from saying these things, they'd be less likely to happen. And it could be psychologically, Freudian repression or whatever reason, that it's actually the opposite. Preventing people from saying it is actually what makes it more likely to happen. And so there is a logic where we say the average person looking at it would say human nature, look how scary, look at the horrible things that we could do. We got to stop ourselves from acting in the way that we know we're capable of acting. So let's just prevent people from talking about it. And that's probably, a good step in stopping it from happening. There's a lot of logic to it. It makes a lot of sense. Your average person who looks at the issue, probably say, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. But if you look at the issue more deeply, like identity, repression, the essential nature of man, It's like, no, like the repression is actually what causes a stronger reaction. If you allowed people to talk about it and express their feelings, there might be, I mean, it could be inevitable, God forbid, that conflict is just a natural order of man. There is no way to prevent eventual conflict. Eventually, society will become fractured, and the factions will rise up one against the other. But my intuition is that, you know, the big gate that most people fall in is if you could repress the ideas, that'll at least slow down the process of you know, these bad things happening. And probably me and you largely are in agreement. It's the opposite. It's actually the repression of these ideas that backfires and makes them more likely to happen.
And have you heard about the Free Britney movement? Britney Spears, the pop singer, has been under conservatorship since 2008. And I think many non-Jews effectively feel like they've been under conservatorship since World War II due to this restriction in what you can discuss publicly and the realm of politics.
Well, I think it only hit with technology and social media and recording that, you know, historically, you didn't know what people said. So if you were in close, you had like-minded people that talked freely amongst themselves, and there wasn't such a big worry, you know, maybe you'd get out or people would, you know, say that they heard this person say something. And so my impression is that, you know, Me Too and the majority of these things are largely caused by the change in surveillance technology. And if you look at the cancel culture, and even like Governor Cuomo, evidence makes a big deal. So accusations versus evidence is a huge difference. Even like that picture of Governor Cuomo, you know, God forbid, grabbing that woman by her cheeks, that looks off. It looks bad. It's still like accusation, but you know, that people said things about each other in the old days, like, oh, you knew what they were saying about you, Luke, and you know, this and this. It is a lot different than like, Luke, did you see that video on YouTube of them trashing you? You know, it's got like thousands of views now.
What do you think of the feelings of many people on the alt-right? They essentially identify with Britney. They feel like they've been placed in a state of conservatorship because the type of political discourse that they want is not possible in the West. So many non-Jews feel essentially that they're in a state of conservatorship with Jews running the show.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably privilege and just inaccuracy, because you have free speech on the street corner. Like, relatively, I don't think the police, you know, maybe like hate crime laws, but like generally, like, no, you could say what you want. You could even, like, you know, do protest. You know, if you want, you could gather outside someone's house and shame them, you know, for their, you know, brother, cousin who doesn't want to give a get. That didn't change. The free speech is still there. That these private, you know, universities, educational institutes, social media, that you don't have a right to those, and you don't, and you can't complain. I mean, you can complain, but there's a difference when they start coming into your house and they stop, you know, letting you do things on street corners, and that there's very little evidence. Versus, you know, even universities, you could say they're public institutes, or you know, that you go to school and you know that you have to be careful about what you say. And even the concept I'm saying about recording technology, now you have to be careful everywhere, because maybe you're going to be recorded and that could come back to haunt you at any time in the future. But still, that was kind of always the case. I mean, I think that, you know, it's just a incorrect perceiving. It's probably amount of the spoiled, entitled nature of growing up in America. Like, I have a right to YouTube. It's like, no, like, you didn't pay for those servers. Like, those aren't yours. YouTube is letting you use this for their own means. And if they change their mind for any reason at any time, like, of course. And, you know, to me, it was like, are you dumb? Like, you think YouTube, like the government? That's why I'm libertarian in that sense. Like, no, I don't think you have much of a stake in these things. They're doing it for their own purpose. Like, it's capitalism. So any of these people on the alt-right that think they're being targeted or persecuted are probably largely inaccurate. You're saying that there's people that will go after and try to ruin their lives. That also, it's like, well, there's just pushback. You're saying like you didn't know any Jews, and you started going to the internet saying bad things about Jews, and then the first Jews you meet are people trying to ruin your life. And it's like, well, what'd you expect? And so the same thing with even if it's Orthodox Jews, like you thought you could get away with when it's just a bunch of you saying the N-word, and then it came out that there's a video of you saying the N-word and it's having repercussions. It's like, what do you think? Like, no rabbi is gonna defend you. That like no I mean, that you might find rabbis that do that, but it's saying from a pure perspective, and that's what Luke, the dangers of the e-personality, is constantly saying, that you could look at that like a LARP, where I'm just playing a character I got on the internet, but saying like, no, that's you, and everything you do, everything you say is likely to come back, and even to think like they're out to get you, they're out to oppress you, is probably an unhealthy way to look at the world. You're saying there's forces at B, and they might not have your interest in mind, and you're saying that and there might be a conflict between groups and resources and these various things. But like I don't like the use of the they. You want to get more intellectual, like the antecedent, in fact, I forgot the high IQ way of expressing it. People say they, like there is no they. If you can't explain who the they is, it's a conspiracy. If you have an answer to the they, it might make sense that there's a conflicting group with conflicting group interest, or that there's powers at B, a conflict over resources and these various things. But certainly that like, oh, YouTube didn't let me do whatever I want on their site for free. I mean, and obviously you spent thousands of hours explaining this to people.
Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you another story. Have you heard about some guy called Zahav? He's the founder of a volunteer Orthodox institution in Israel, a volunteer emergency response group. He's been called Yehuda Meshi Zahav. He's been called the Haredi Jeffrey Epstein. So there are all these allegations about him committing sexual abuse. And have you heard about this guy? Any thoughts on the story?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing about him for decades. I mean, it's a popular organization. They don't exist here in Detroit. I think we actually donate, even the local synagogue, we donated like a motorcycle ambulance to them. I don't know the man. God forbid it doesn't surprise me. I don't know if he's Jeffrey Epstein. Like I'm saying, he probably did some bad things, and I don't know if it was child molestation or whatever the case is. God forbid. But unfortunately, say it's not even surprising. It's, even in Israel, you have like prime ministers, with high levels, and even from the Haredi perspective, generally the people in these organizations, they're not rabbis. Like they're not expected to be engaging in the most upright behavior. And we talked about that story a few months ago in the Talmud. Like Rabbi Elkanan, or whatever, the guy who
Rabbi Dosa.
Yeah, and saying the Talmud calls him rabbi. Like the interesting dynamic in the story that even like that's talking about, God forbid, about this guy saying prostitutes. The interesting thing is the Talmud doesn't mention, like it still calls him rabbi. So especially in Jerusalem and the place of Western values. There was another story, God forbid, like this statutory rape case, and it was like a 21-year-old guy and a 13-year-old girl. And I guess the girl said she was 14, but God forbid, in Israel, the age of statutory rape is actually 14. And because this girl said that she was 14, that they're not charging this man because they said it was consensual. So that's the law in Israel. And you're saying polygamy, like Israel is still to some extent fighting polygamy, and the ban against polygamy was from Europe, so that Jews would be more amenable in the eyes of Europeans and Christians. That polygamy was the path of Jews until the Ashkenazic Jews, and even to so like God forbid, Judaism, according to a Western standards, is a different culture, and certain things that are looked really, really bad upon in different cultures could be looked at as not good, or God forbid, but they're not as bad. So at this point, God forbid, like head of one of these organizations, it happened with the Shomrim. And I remember I was in Brooklyn, or like they didn't really like like everyone kind of assumed that these type people were probably engaged in inappropriate behaviors and they weren't rabbis. That's why they were doing mitzvahs. And even he said it himself. He's probably like, I'm not a rabbi. Like, like he was doing good deeds. He probably did help all of those people. And God forbid, maybe he did that. And historically, we probably, would have took a nuanced view on it and the totality of the person, say like, yes, this guy probably did do all these wonderful things. And yes, he probably wasn't Jeffrey Epstein bad, but he might have been pretty bad. He might have molested a bunch of kids and God forbid, horrible things. And, what do you do with that? Does it discount the fact that he did run this emergency rescue organization that helped all these people? So in the, Haredi Orthodox world versus any way of like cancel culture, pre-internet, immediate information, like Luke Ford's the world expert and say like he was a reporter in, Hollywood, showing this stuff. But no, I mean, and it's not just Haredi Orthodox Jews. Saying that's a mirror of the karma that we live in. This is, God forbid, it's not QAnon. Like QAnon, like that. Saying that like people are perverted, people like don't control their sexual behavior, people do a lot of messed up stuff. You don't have to be a QAnon conspiracist to look and be suspicious of people in power that they're doing messed up stuff.
Now, I once spoke to a psychiatrist about reparative therapy for homosexuals, and he said he could help someone who wanted to be straight functioning. So let's take a guy who's married to a woman, but he, say, wants to desist from engaging in homosexual activity on the side. So the psychiatrist thought that he could help this guy become straight functioning and desist from homosexual behavior and restrict his sexuality just to expressing it with his wife within marriage. How much effectiveness do you think that reparative therapy can do to, say, shift people away from having sex with men so that if they have sex, it's only with, say, their spouse who's a woman?
I think it has to be more renunciation. Generally, the Orthodox approach would probably be that if a person has the desires, they're just like if desiring another man's wife. You're not allowed to do it. It doesn't matter. You have to repress it. And so modern therapies, the general approach would just be like who cares? I think it's your Dennis Prager's favorite example where I've heard him tell the story like 20 times, even though I've only listened to him like 30 times, about when he was a kid and his rabbi says it's time to daven mincha, and he says I don't want to daven mincha, and Dennis Prager's rabbi says who cares, daven mincha. And saying like, yeah, it doesn't matter whether you want to daven mincha or not, you got to do it. So that's generally the attitude towards homosexuality. Like, I don't care if you have the desire or not. It's like child molesting. So like, I don't care whether you have that desire or not. Like, you're not going to do it. You're not going to get away with doing it. And to look at homosexuality in that way is the traditional approach. That it doesn't, if you're born that way, if you, whatever reason you're thinking like that, it's a crime and you don't get to act it out. And that's why from an Orthodox perspective is pretty we're the bad guys in modern society.
Now, I notice among traditional Orthodox Jews, they generally tend to have quite a bit of skepticism about psychotherapy, and modern Orthodox Jews tend to have the same attitudes towards psychotherapy as the rest of society. Have you noticed that? What are the different attitudes you've noticed within Orthodox Judaism to psychotherapy?
Yeah, so I mentioned, you asked me like what I was shocked most. And I remember in Jerusalem, I was shocked that people, kind of like publicly beat their kids in synagogue. And it was almost like everyone kind of looked and gave them the nod, like that's what you're supposed to do. And this is poor Yerushalmis that don't even speak Hebrew in, Mea Sharm or places like that. But from a certain perspective about what is acceptable, what's not, and to say like that is completely unacceptable. Like in an American synagogue like LA or something, like you could not beat your kid in the synagogue, and like they would call the police on you, as where like maybe in Mea Sharm, if your kid's acting up and you don't beat them, they're gonna look at you like you're not a real father, and so it's a cultural expectation and then the law set up in a different way. Like Stephen Molyneux, I saw him on Cato Gottfried and was mentioning like, like you don't get to spank your kids. I'm sorry, it's not your right. Like you're in the blue-eyed man's culture, Switzerland, northern Canada, and even if it's your custom to spank your kids in order to discipline them, we're going to take your kids away from you and have you arrested if you do that. So like the sensibilities that Ashkenazic Jews, saying like, polygamy or something, it is our way, God forbid, but like, no, it's not our way. For 1,000 years. We haven't done polygamy. We've completely uprooted it from our culture, largely due to the sensibilities of the non-Jews that we lived amongst. And we discussed this, going back to more halacha in a Jewish Torah perspective. Judaism is a religion to live and thrive and build up a family and be successful. And, it says it's good to be rich. It's good to be respected among the Goyim. That the largest reason that we adapt is to success. They're saying that if you speak to your rabbi and tell him that, not like driving on Sabbath, but a lot of smaller things, and saying like, I could succeed in business, but there's, small conflict with Jewish law, that most rabbis want you to succeed and are going to work with you in that manner. So when it comes back to how Jews behave, we're largely a mirror of the societies we live in, and the mirror of that will be in the sensibilities of our society. So the question, what is really Jewish, what is not? So like the get question of that we started talking about was, what's the true spirit of Jewish law? Is it really the man's right to chain his wife, and that he's not really a bad guy, it's his right, and that those rabbis are the bad guys, and really they should be encouraging his wife to get back together with him, and that's the spirit of Jewish law. And the reason we're behaving like this now is because we've adapted Goyish sensibilities, and we want the blue-eyed man to like us more, or whatever reason, we've changed our Judaism. Or you're going to argue, like a Mark Shapiro or something, like from a scholarly point of view, it's like, no, like that's not a Jewish thing to do. There's certain sects of Jews that somehow picked up acting like this and incorporated their actions that were improper into their Jewishness. But from a scholarly point of view, like, no, it's not Jewish. It's just a custom that's bad. And for some reason, a bunch of Jews have done it, and it's a good thing, like Luke Ford in the first time we talked, like, no, it's a good thing that they report child molesters to the police, even though there might be precedents of good reason of thousands of years of Europe, where it's saying like the biggest crime you could do as a Jew is to report a fellow Jew to the secular authorities.
Now, another big difference between the traditional Orthodox and the modern Orthodox is pets. I noticed many modern Orthodox Jews have pets, but traditional Orthodox Jews almost never have pets. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and these are kind of like we mentioned the schools, and like once you have the kids in the system, it's a much higher standard. So like Luke could be welcome, included in Minyan at every major Orthodox synagogue in LA, but if he had kids and was trying to enroll them in their schools, he might get a different response. And so from that perspective, what do you have to do to be in good standing in the community as a standalone person, to what you have to be in good standing to say that your kids are within the system, or intermarried, or more pressure. It's very complicated dynamics, saying that's why rabbis are so powerful and get paid the big bucks, because they're the ones who are supposed to minister over these important decisions that are largely come down to what's best for the Jews. I mean, me and Luke aren't going to be the ones. We could have our opinions on what's best for the Jews, and we do, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a bunch of Orthodox rabbis that are going to go through some process of deciding what's best for the Jews, and that has layers of implementations to like public shaming or various things that so it's actually pretty interesting and dynamic. And it could be there'll be pushback. It could be like was is nice, and they'll realize pushback is like, what the hell are we doing? Like we don't want our kids on Facebook. We don't want them using social media, like the education. And then like they think the use of social media to publicly shame get refusers is a good use of the technology. To you see the panel of Orthodox rabbis that made the decision of what's best for the Jews. They made a bad decision, and because Judaism is a religion to live by, hopefully they'll recognize they made a bad decision, and adapt. And so in theory, that's the halakhic process, that's the Jewish process. and there's a utility to it because the rabbis make these decisions based on what's best for the Jews, and what's best for the Jews changes.
Okay, let me read a little bit from this website, fakenews.net, nous.net. And the articles here are by various philosophers. One here by Michael Humer. He writes, "What's wrong with attacking our own society?" And he notes, almost all societies have been highly ethnocentric. They teach their members that their own society is the best in the world, that their values, their institutions, and their traditions are the morally correct ones and are better than those of any other society. Does that seem realistic, Dovid?
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little. I mean, realistic. If you say realistic, no, I mean, human nature is a very dark thing, and any realistic, vision that doesn't recognize the true depths of the depravity of human nature, which means everybody. Doesn't mean like there's bad people out there that do bad things. It means your common average person in certain circumstances, if triggered, would do these bad things, and saying like everybody's a suspect because it's human nature. So I mean that's probably me and you why we could continue our friendship, because largely we probably both have a pretty accurate or negative view about the true nature of human nature, and also to seeing that really anybody could go down that rabbit hole. If you what you've recovered and reported, that you can't really choose, you can't really tell who's going to go good or bad. There's various reasons why people make the decisions, but at the end of the day, good people become bad and bad people become good.
Right. But the idea, Adam Green, for example, he's outraged that Jews regard themselves as God's chosen people. And my point to him would be that every people essentially regards themselves as the best, that their values are the best, their traditions are the best, and that their people are the best. Do you think I'm accurate that this is almost universal?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Adam even called you out. He's like, no, he didn't think like that. And I think Jews might think like that more so than other people, maybe Westerners or certain competitive Greek spirit. But no, I think most people are more content with their lot and don't really think greatness is within them, and don't really honor or see, trying to be the best. And I say that like, I was a chess champion. I reached on a regional level, as a kid, being the best. And, so like, no, like it wasn't like such a big thing to be the best at something. And, people don't necessarily, like love you and honor you. Usually they want to beat you, or, from one or two perspective, like, why would you put so much effort to be, the best at something? What does that mean? Like, what, they even says something bad at you, or, some sort of denial that like you're not really better than other people. It's a fallacy that like, even though maybe you have a higher rating, you won that tournament, that you're not, you're not really better than other people. So like, no, I agree with Adam Green that, you might have that nature. Your father, you might have had enough experience around people where you knew enough people who thought like that. But I would say it's even the minority. I would probably say less than 1 out of 4 people really think much about being the best or caring about that. And even as a nation, like America as an exceptional nation, Americans probably think that more so than others. But even in America, I would say probably less than 50% of Americans really could give a crap whether America's the best or not, and even think that's dumb when all these politicians are talking about that. Just like, why does he keep on saying that? Who cares about being the best? I mean, I was saying, are our perceptions that much different, where you think at the heart of every person there's some sort of desire that we're the best, or you're accepting my view that it's actually a minority and the majority of people kind of just accept their lot?
No, I believe all society, I'm not talking here every individual, I'm talking societies. Every society is highly ethnocentric. Every society regards their own values, their own institutions, their own traditions as the most morally correct ones. Can you think of any society that is highly self-critical? Can you think of any society like that? I don't believe they exist.
Well, I've been focusing on with Jennifer, we've been talking about the Aryan kings and these blue-eyed theories. But aren't there a bunch of studies, like even with African American children preferring blue-eyed babies, that those famous studies where they gave dolls a black and white baby to white and black kids, and even the black kids preferred the white dolls, and that there could be a colorism, say like you as a blue-eyed man who history has favored possibly versus darker skinned people, I think colorism. I've noticed that, like, as someone in Detroit, I've coached a lot of kids chess, and I have had literally tens, hundreds of people tell me, Dave, I can't do it, I'm black. And, from that perspective, like, maybe like you haven't had, too many people tell you, like, Luke, I can't do it, I got blue eyes. But like I've had hundreds, probably, but maybe 100. It's like, Dave, I can't do it, I'm black. And I have to convince them, like, yes, you can do it. Being black isn't a hindrance to you. And so, it could be like Jews have that confidence. And on a global perspective, like certainly like Hindus, Indians, Chinese, Native Americans. No, I think you're completely inaccurate. I think that your average person, they have some perspective, like
wait,
culture.
I got to interrupt you. I keep talking about societies. You keep talking about individuals. So I asked you to name some societies that are highly self-critical. I'm not aware of any.
Well, as in just the colorism and Eurocentric, that people adapt and appropriate other people's cultures as a whole. So even Jews are making the point of, how did Jews become so white? And so we probably were self-loathing. We probably thought that white people were better in the ancient Middle Eastern world, where we were Middle Eastern people. We probably looked at European later featured people like they were superior to us, God forbid, and appropriated our own culture to be more amenable with whiteness. And that's a trend globally, like the white privilege. People think that white culture is better. And it's like, I used to like Malcolm X, like wearing suits, saying like, if a black man wears a suit, even a Jew, saying like, I say like, I don't like, I'm not wearing a suit. Why am I trying to look, like Malcolm X said, why are you trying to look like the people who hate you so much? I used to even joke next to the guy sitting next to synagogue, because I didn't like wearing suits. Saying, put a suit on, put a tie on. It was the joke, like, because God forbid, a Holocaust survivor is saying like, you so much trying to copy the very people that hate you. And, so you see that, why, if people felt that way, why would they be trying to copy European culture, even just speaking English? Saying like respect the Yiddish Hasidim that refuse to speak English. If you really respected your own culture, you would refuse to speak this horrible tongue of the English language. And so when you dump your own culture to become secularized, speak a foreign language, speak a foreign culture, isn't that proof that people are not that ethnocentric?
No, because you're just talking about some.
Not
some
people, as
individuals.
society. So society is as a whole.
Okay, name me one society that's highly self-critical.
I mean, self-critical, they're saying that they, in the way that they've taken the culture of a foreign nation as their own. We're saying a lot of the ones in Africa, a lot of the cultures in Africa have basically
just name one.
Well, India as a whole.
India as a whole is highly self-critical.
They're self-critical that they have an inferiority complex, that maybe the Anglos are factually better than us, that maybe our history and our culture is factually inferior to the Anglos, so much so that we should dump our customs and what our ancestors did for years and just copy the Anglos. No more dhotis, no more bindis and things on the head. We're going to wear suits, and we're going to speak a different language, and we're going to act a different way. And saying like, no, I mean, isn't that the general trend that people try to copy the Anglos? And why would they be trying to copy the Anglos if they didn't think the Anglos were superior to them?
I think first of all, I think it's a minority of the population. I don't think there's ever been a time where a majority of Indians thought that their own culture was inferior. So I think you're talking about a relatively small minority, and I think they only want to copy the Anglos in some superficial things like perhaps dress or speaking English or something like that.
Speaking English is superficial?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, saying that, I don't think so. I'm saying like, that's why you see I mean, I've seen, Jewish nationalists, and even the capitalist, he used to tell me, in Yiddish, like, Mashiach read nicht kein English. Like, Mashiach's not going to be speaking English. And even Jews in Israel who were like that hated the English, hated the Anglos, hated everything they stand for, and refused to speak English. And so there's a lot of Jews in Israel who feel like that. And certainly in India, there's a lot of pressure to say, why the hell are we speaking this stupid English language? And using that as a pushback. Language is probably the single most important factor. Saying Jews, like, why do we wear suits? Why do we do all these European customs? Because we thought that we are an inferior culture, and dumped our culture for the way of the European man. And you're saying, why would we, if we thought we were the best, why did we dump our history for the European path?
Okay, some Jews changed the way they dressed, and some Jews learned the language of the majority nation. Many other Jews did not. But any Jew that stayed identifying as a Jew, ipso facto, they regarded being Jewish as superior to being not Jewish or being
But
Christian.
their form of Judaism is already adapted away. So it's like polygamy. You're saying that or like we're talking about the get refused, but it's saying wearing a suit. Orthodox Jews, you're like, I'm sure every synagogue that you go to, everyone wears suits. And it's saying Jews wear suits because we're embarrassed of our own culture. And if you're a Jew and you put on a suit to go to synagogue, you're a joke. You're embarrassed of what it means to be a Jew, and you think you have to dress up and pretend to be the European man just to go to synagogue. And saying, like, you're a Jew. You're not a European. Why are you wearing their clothing? Especially to go to your holy place. Like, what the hell? You put on the European dress to go to your holy institute? What are you doing?
Well, if those people really thought as you did, they would convert and become Christian. This is just a very superficial and shallow absorption of majority norms in the culture in which they live. It's not an overall assumption that the majority culture is superior to their own, because any Jew who lives in the diaspora and is a minority, therefore, and who chooses to retain a Jewish identity, ipso facto believes that being Jewish is superior to the alternatives. Because any Jew today in the United States or in Europe, they could convert to Christianity. But any Jew that chooses not to do that and to remain a minority, they only do that because they believe being Jewish is superior to the alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, but in this period, there's no real benefit to converting to Christianity. And the basic premise of my point is saying that Jews generally are embarrassed of our own culture. And even the Jewish culture that we put forward is largely what Jews took from Europe. So we put forward these European things that we did and this is historic Jewish debates, like wearing a tie. Wearing a tie was extremely controversial when it first started happening. And there were people who said that wearing a tie is avodah zorah. And there are famous stories of Hasidic rabbis, even the famous Chovel Sotamidim, that Rabbi Shapiro, that Eish Kodesh that became so popular. He used to rip ties off of people. He was a Hasidic rabbi. And if you came into a synagogue and wearing a tie, he went up and ripped it off, and he yelled at you for copying the Christians. But now if you go to synagogue, everyone wears a tie. And you're saying that, so how did that happen? And you're saying, so you're saying now that like wearing a tie is indicative of being a proud Jew. And I'm telling you, it's the opposite, that when you go to synagogue and you see people wearing ties, it's because people think that Jewish culture stinks and they adapted the path of the European man that they thought was better than them.
So I never said anything.
This isn't my opinion. And this was like, even in Israel, this is mainstream opinion. In not mainstream, I'm saying there are huge sectarians, like in Israel, like wearing a tie. I don't know if you remember, if you think about that, but like even a lot of Dati, modern Orthodox people, like you're not allowed to wear a tie. That's considered, something distinctively European, and something like, why are you doing it? And there could be all Maimonides, like Sfardim, saying like, you're a Jew, you should be going to traditional Jewish dress. But if you saw someone wearing traditional Jewish dress as an American, you would be embarrassed. And so why are you embarrassed? If you see someone with payas walking down the street and you get embarrassed, you think, oh, like, look at that guy, isn't he a little weird? Saying like, like I wear a suit and tie, and your average person couldn't even tell I was a Jew if they were looking at me. And so like, no, I'm completely rejecting your point. I think, in fact, Orthodox Jews and Jews in general are down on our own culture. And that's why generally Jews have went with European culture, that most Jews have dumped our own culture for European culture. And I keep on making the point of language and clothing. If you're so committed to Judaism, why?
Okay, you're repeating the point. So I just want to repeat, I think, the most ridiculous of your points, that any Jew who wears a tie hates being Jewish and despises Jewish culture. To me, that's absurd. For example, I'll give you an example from non-Jewish life. When I moved from Australia to the United States, there were certain changes in the language that you could use. So in Australia, a rubber meant an eraser. But when I came to the United States, I learned not to ask for a rubber because that meant a condom in the United States. So I changed my language to suit my new environment. But that didn't mean for a second that I had any embarrassment about being from Australia. Also, in Australia, wearing dress shorts was perfectly acceptable. Professors would teach classes, bank managers would walk around wearing a dress shirt, a tie, and dress shorts. But one friend of mine, he was a professor moving from Australia to California, and the first day he went to teach his class in dress shorts, everyone laughed at him. So he never again wore dress shorts because that was unacceptable clothing in California while it was perfectly acceptable in Australia. So we learned to adapt to a new culture, but it didn't involve any thinking the less of our own Australian culture. We're simply adapting to changing circumstances. But you're arguing that if a Jew wears a tie, that ipso facto means he despises Jewish culture.
Well, I mentioned that because that's actually something that anyone who's studying Jerusalem, or it's a sectarian thing, and there are it's a thing that you're not supposed to wear a tie. You're not allowed to wear a tie, and there are whole sects of not just Haredim, even modern Orthodox people that in Israel that don't wear ties. So it's a distinctive thing that you could tell a person's affiliation from. And like I remember, I think I mentioned, like, I wore a tie a few times when I first started like Mir Yeshiva, and they're like, don't wear a tie. Like only rabbis wear a tie, and it was a sign of like a distinctive honor to wear a tie. And if you're not a rabbi, you can't just wear a tie. You can't be in yeshiva. And it was actually, like policy. There was a rule. You couldn't just put a tie on. So I mentioned that. They say, no, it's not stupid. Anybody who's been in Israel and been in yeshiva knows that there might actually be rules. And I mean, you just make it sound like numbers. So you're just like, okay, most people speak English, and I fully think Hebrew and Yiddish is superior. But because we're smaller people, maybe smaller but superior, we're going to teach our kids the language of the majority. And it is absolutely no implication that you think that your own culture is inferior, that you're going to teach your kids the language of a different culture. And things like naming, like Irving, Howard, all these Jewish names that are, really not Jewish names. They're Anglo names that Jews chose for themselves. Like, why are there so many Jews named, Irved, or named these Goyish names? And because Jews are down on their own culture. And you're saying, like, no, they just wanted to blend in. But you said you weren't embarrassed of being Australian. And so so wearing a tie, a certain marker, speaking a language, what about the name change? And I'm sure people who wrestle with this. And one of the biggest differences between modern Orthodox and Haredi, or even mainstream Orthodox, is the name. Are you Yaakov, Yosef, or are you Joseph? Are you Luke or Mark on your passport, and when you go to shul, you're Ephraim or Levi, or like on your passport, are you Levi? And to a certain extent, that's how you're portraying yourself to larger society. And if your name is Yaakov, and when you go to City Hall and you say I'm Jacob, or even worse, you say, let me just call myself something so they don't even think I'm Jewish. That is an indication that people think that their own culture is inferior, and like not just Jews. That's the whole idea of assimilation, that the Anglo culture is superior. And if you come from another culture, like, I'm sorry that you were born inferior, too bad. The best you could do is dump your ways and take on the ways of this different culture that, God forbid, just like a caste. I'm sorry, like you were born with blue eyes. You're just better than me. There's nothing I could do about it. The best I could do is copy your ways, copy your language, copy your dress, and hope, like people don't notice my eyes aren't blue.
So when I came to the United States and I stopped saying rubber and instead I said eraser, to you that symbolizes I despise Australian culture.
No, it's a straw man. You're saying when you come to America and you're a Seventh-day Adventist and you meet a person and they ask you, like, what are you? And you say, like, you're a Gnostic, you're Protestant, because you're scared to tell them what you really are. In the same way as a Jew, that's a bigger difference than saying, like, okay, just what word, how you call something. And when you look in the mirror and you're like, oh crap, these people don't like Seventh-day Adventists, so let me just pretend I'm not one of them. and pretend. So you're going to pretend you're something else. And so that thing that you pretend you are, by definition, you must think is superior. So if your real name is non-Anglo and you present yourself with an Anglo name, by definition, and that's not the same thing as like calling a rubber an eraser, so people don't get confused.
Okay,
You're saying
so
that's the exact same thing for changing your name from what it really is to sound Anglo.
it's similar. It's not exactly the same thing. But if someone, let's say they're born Yaakov and they're born in insular Haredi community in Israel, and then when they're 15, their parents move to the Midwest where there are very few Jews. Now, if they choose to change their name to Jacob to make their life easier, I don't think that indicates at all that they loathe their own Jewish culture or their own Jewish upbringing. They simply want to make their life easier because it's very annoying to have to spell Yaakov every time you meet someone in an area where there are very few Jews around.
Yeah, but what if they change it to Irving? What if they change it to something that's Anglo? It's okay, like, not just going to give the Anglicization of the Hebrew name. I'm going to give a completely different name. And what if it's dressed, saying he grew up there and they dressed and, did certain things. And then he starts taking on the customs of the other people and saying, what customs does he take? What people does he decide to draw on? And is there a subconscious assumption, like if you dye your hair blonde, does that mean that you think blonde people are superior? And then say, well, why would you do it? If you don't think blonde people are superior, why are you dyeing your hair blonde? Or a certain aspect like that. If you don't think these people are superior and you needed some custom other than your own, why did you take the custom from them?
Because you're choosing to live among people and you want to make your life easier. You don't want to have constant explanations. You don't want to differ from the majority in ways that aren't significant. So you can keep Shabbos, you can keep kosher, but you don't have to have a name that non-Jews can't pronounce and don't know how to spell. So you can retain all your observance, but you simply choose to make your life easier and more effective by choosing a name that the majority can relate to.
Yeah, but saying Jews tier European, that in the sense like you live in a place where white people are like less than 20% and Anglos are probably just like a few percent. So what sense you come and try to you should be trying to blend in with the Hispanics and blacks. Why are you trying to blend in with the Anglos? So saying Jews or various people, saying they make an assessment of this is where I come from, these are the various cultures, and these are I'm going to dump this from my background and take upon something from someone else's culture. So if you were doing that, you in LA, you wouldn't be copying Anglos, you'd be copying Hispanics and blacks. But you're saying Jews don't look like this. The Hispanics and blacks, they don't have a superior culture to us Jews. But the Anglo, the blue-eyed man, has a superior culture to us Jews. And so Jews tier towards the Anglo and saying that's like suits, like they don't wear suits. And Hispanics and blacks don't wear suits. You're not blending in by wearing a suit. You're looking like a European.
Well, Jews in Los Angeles don't interact much with blacks and Latinos. They primarily interact with whites and Asians. So it doesn't matter if blacks and Latinos form a majority of the population. You just don't socially, economically, culturally, you just have very little in common with those communities and very few interactions. So there's no reason why you'd assimilate.
Jews don't think that blacks and Hispanics have a superior culture to them. Jews think that Anglos have a superior culture to us.
Yes, that's true, but that's only part of the story. You want to also, usually most people prefer to do things in an easier way rather than a more difficult way. And so if you can make your life easier by when you go to work, you fit in with the clothing norms of your employer, your work history is going to go a lot more smoothly than if you go to work in ways that completely clash with your employer's expectations.
So you just agree that I said, that you said that most cultures, societies think that they have the best, but then, I wore you down. I got you to agree that actually Jews as a whole don't necessarily think that we have the best culture, and that as a whole, there's a huge fraction of Jews that think that Anglos actually have a superior culture and have abandoned our culture for the culture of the Anglos. And I'm saying you're accepting what I'm
Not
saying,
at all.
but then you're saying that that's not.
Not at all. Not at all. That Jews may choose to adopt a manner of dress and a type of name and cultural mannerisms such as shaking hands, etc., to simply make their life easier. It has nothing to do with the thinking that Anglo culture is superior to Jewish culture. Any Jew who thinks that Christian culture or Anglo culture is superior to their culture is highly likely to convert out. If a Jew chooses to remain as a tiny minority in a dominant non-Jewish country, and they choose to retain an identity as Jewish, that's because they believe that the Jewish identity that they hold is superior to the alternatives. Now, in certain individual areas, they may recognize that, hey, they may recognize that Christian art, they may think Christian art is superior to Jewish art, they might think that Christian music is superior to Jewish music, but that's only one tiny aspect of identity. If a Jew thought that non-Jewish identity was superior overall to Jewish identity, they would simply leave Judaism, leave Jewish identity, and take on a new identity. Any Jew who chooses to retain a Jewish identity in the diaspora, where they're a tiny minority, is ipso facto demonstrating that they regard their identity as, for them, superior to all alternatives.
Yeah, so let's just look at the facts. What percent of Jews that came to America held on to our own identities? What percent dumped their identity? And of those who dumped their identity, what did we dump it for? And we say, well, I would say that probably the majority of Jews that came to America before the Orthodox dumped our identity, and we changed our identity for Anglo identity. And so you're saying that factually, as a whole, the majority of Jews in America thought that our Jewish identity was inferior to Anglo identity, and wholesale gave it away and traded it in for Anglo identity. And
no, because
even Orthodox
they're not considered Anglo. Unless the Jews converted to Christianity, the Jews are not considered Anglo. Now, when Jews have had a choice,
in America we were. Not
when
England,
Jews have had a choice, they've always chosen away from Orthodox Judaism. So yes, Jews came to the United States. They chose not to be Orthodox Jews, but overwhelmingly they did not convert to Protestantism or Catholicism.
Yeah, so but we overwhelmingly took on an Anglo identity. So we didn't become Christians.
They're not
our
Anglo.
eyes didn't magically turn blue.
Anglo.
But what we copied from we didn't take on a whole bunch of Native American things. We didn't take on a whole bunch of Black and Hispanic things. We took on Anglo things, and that's true till today. If you look at Orthodox Jews, secular Jews, and say historically, what was Jewish? What did we drop, and what did we pick up that we probably largely copied the Anglo man? And I'm looking at it as direct proof that say a sizable chunk of the Jewish people factually looked down on ourselves and thought the Anglo man was superior to us, and said, yeah, we can't become Anglo, and because it's an ethnic thing, and Jews might be light featured. There might be millions of blue-eyed Jews from Eastern Europe that were able to largely blend in from Anglos because they had light features, but even light featured Eastern European Jews aren't Anglos. However, in American society, where being baptized in the Anglican Church didn't really mean anything, but going to university, being part of these larger structures where you didn't actually have to be Christian, you basically just had to take on a certain element of Anglo culture that Jews did largely the minimum. And even after the identity shift, where Jews lost touch with the identity, that after generations of secular Jews in America, most Jews are in an identity crisis of this whiteness that we dumped our Judaism largely for the way of the Anglo, but we're not Anglo. So what do we do with that now? And I mean, you're accepting my point that Jews.
Not at all. I don't accept
you
any
accept
of your
the point
points.
that Jews
You
are
argue
geared
that
towards
most
the
American
Anglo.
Jews have become Anglo, and they haven't. Most American Jews do not identify as Anglo. They're not regarded by anyone else as Anglo. They've taken on some Anglo mannerisms. They've taken on some Anglo ways of dressing, but their overall identity is not Anglo.
Well, I didn't say our identity is Anglo, but I'm saying I'm making the point that I completely disagree with you that most cultures think that we're the best, and I think most Jews don't even think that we're the best. And saying, so what are these Jews that think that we're not the best think? Most Jews that think that Jews are not the best think that Germanic or Anglo people are the best. So the mannerisms, when we looked at it, what does it mean to be a Jew? what is it that makes us us versus what is it that makes them them, that the majority of the things that Jews changed about us, we took the Anglo way of doing it. And even, like you're giving the point that even in LA today, where 75% of people, dark skinned, that Jews are still likely to copy the mannerisms of this like extreme minority of Anglo people over the vast majority of Hispanics they live amongst, because Jews do not think that Hispanics or blacks have a superior culture to us. Jews think that Anglos and Germanic people have a superior culture to us. And I'm not saying all Jews, but I said, like, in my impression, like, so I would probably say half of Ashkenazic Jews have some sort of inferiority complex, and the inferiority complex is largely to the blue-eyed man, largely towards the Germans and the Anglos, and that's largely what Jews who start dumping our customs and try to copy the ways of other people try to do it towards.
So, in my life experience, my conversations with Jews in America, even completely secular Jews who don't observe Judaism, overwhelmingly they regard being Jewish as superior to the alternatives. So you're arguing that a majority of American Jews regard themselves as an inferior form of identity?
Only to really Anglos and Germanics. I mean, Jews have like a pecking order, but Jews, yeah, they're I mean, Jews are obviously proud of our culture, but you said that Jews have a big hang-up, of Europeans and Germanic and Anglo peoples, and there's very clear that Jewish culture. I mean, just like the fact, like, how is it possible that 25% of Jews in America have blue eyes, and that like there's millions and millions of Jews with blue eyes, and presumably that's not because like thousands of years ago Jews had blue eyes. It's because Jews chose actively to look at European culture as the target population. And there's, like so you say maybe the lost tribes in Africa are all of this, but like of 10 million Jews, of the huge number, the Ashkenazic, the directions, the mannerism, the number of people who speak English, even in Israel, like these are common debates in Israel. You're saying that Israel is an Anglo nation. Israel is set up as a socialist European state. And that's because most Israeli Jews think that the Europeans are better than us. So much so that we modeled our state not after our own traditions and customs, but after the superior ways of the European man. And so this is like a common thing in India and a lot of nations. And I mean, you're just completely rejecting that?
Oh, no, I think that Jews recognize that sometimes non-Jews have superior ways of doing things. I think what's more apropos is that Jews recognize that to get ahead in a particular society, they have to adopt certain names, certain mannerisms, and certain skills. So as Anglo-Saxons have been the dominant cultural, economic, political class in this country for about 200, 300 years, that, if Jews, to the extent they assimilate, they're going to assimilate towards what the upper class is doing. But as long as they retain a Jewish identity, they're choosing to assimilate in certain ways, but overall they're still retaining their Jewish identity. Otherwise, if they wanted to be fully Anglo, they would have to convert to a Protestant faith.
I mean, this is in our own literature, and it's historical because historically it wasn't the Anglo, it was the Germanic people that Jews tiered towards, and so even in Europe, Jews didn't think that Poles, Slavs, Russians had a superior culture to us. We thought that Germans had a superior culture towards us, and that's why we spoke Yiddish, and that's why even Jews in Poland didn't speak Polish. They spoke Yiddish because they thought that Germans had a superior culture to Poles. And so if a Jew was going to leave our Jewish ways, no Jew in their right mind was going to dump their Judaism to be Polish. But even the elite, the sons of millionaires and rabbis might have dumped their Judaism to become German. And there's proof of that, like Yiddish. Why would there be millions of Jews in Russian and Poland that don't even speak the language of the people they live amongst and speak a language based on Germanic people? And saying because there was a cultural, so to say, appropriation of Jews in the land, saying what we're doing is not being successful, and we appropriated towards a certain nation. It was largely German, and then after World War II, it's been largely Anglo. I mean, before World War II, most Jews would have thought it would have been Germany, that we would have been, that was the power, that like, if there's one culture that's better than Judaism, which there probably isn't, but if there's one, it's German. And then after the war, it became Anglo like that. And so I think it's uniquely Jews that I agree with Adam Green. In my experience with non-Jews, is actually a lot of them are pretty down on themselves. And they don't think they're the best. They're actually, I mean, what about my statement about chess players? The hundreds of black kids that told me they can't do it because they're black. If they were so ethnocentric, why would they told me they can't do it because they're black?
Oh, everybody prefers to do the things that they're good at, and overall, playing chess is not a typically black strength, as opposed to say playing basketball or rapping or playing football or other activities. I've got to fuel up on some water, so why don't you hold down the show for a couple of minutes, talk about anything you like, all right?
Oh, sure, great. Yeah, I enjoy talking about this, Luke, and maybe COVID-19 really get these situations out, and it takes a lot of scholarship, a lot of understanding with Jewish culture, to put even as a group strategy to understand it in a certain way. And I mentioned like the Thai thing, and maybe Luke hasn't seen those type things, but there is in Jerusalem and Israel, there's a lot of pushback against European culture in trying to extract European culture from Judaism. And even Luke, when he mentioned Mark Shapiro and the concept of Mizrahi, was that all of these things that Jews did in Europe, largely to get along in Europe, are no longer applicable. So all the various things, if it was like 6 hours between milk and meat, or whatever it is that Orthodox Jew who keeps Jewish law would be worried about, that for years we did because of living in Europe. Now that we're in Israel, we no longer have to follow those customs, as opposed to the Haredim that say that look at it, you have an obligation to preserve these European customs, even in Israel, even in America, because there's some absolute value to preserving customs. It's not just a utility basis to say, okay, we copied the ways of the Germans because Germans were the most powerful nation, and now Germany is not the most powerful nation anymore, so we're going to copy the way of the Anglos. And then America is the most powerful nation, so we're going to copy the way of the Americans. And if China became the most powerful nation, Jews would copy the way of the Chinese and amalgamate into that. So I think that Luke is making a point. I'm not invalidating his point in like about a group strategy, that whether people think it's the best or not. Honestly, I think it's a personality type. I think a lot of people, the majority of people, basically just accept their lot, think that greatness isn't possible for them, and never try for it. And that this nature of wanting to be the best is possibly unique to Judaism or to exceptional Goyim, or from a Jewish point of view, there's nations. So like the classical Kabbalistic, like Adam Green, in the beginning it was Egypt, then it was Assyria, then it was Persia, then it was Greece, and then if you follow like the timeline, it became Spain, then it became Amsterdam, then it became Germany, then it became England, and then it became America. And Jews are part of the nation that's the most powerful. So if it's like the blue-eyed man, for the last few hundred years, the world so to say was dominated by the blue-eyed man, and so the Jews are largely in the lands and territory and active in the ways of the blue-eyed man. But biblically, historically, like in the time of the Bible, it wasn't the blue-eyed man; it was the Egyptian. In the time of the Talmud, like the blue-eyed man wasn't anything special. We were copying the ways of the Babylonians, and so on and so on, until we eventually arrived in the lands of Europe. And now that we're so to say back in Israel, so Luke in L.A., where say Jews have to do what's best for the Jewish people, and is it better to copy Anglo ways in LA in 2021, even though there's hardly any Anglos in LA? Or is it better to copy Hispanic people in LA, even though they make 50% of the population? And there's probably some dispute, but like generally as a trend, you think like most Orthodox Jews are still tearing towards Europe, but then there's also the pivot east. So if you're in Israel and you're looking like we want to get ahead, and there's really no benefit towards trying to act like the European man. In fact, in the current state of the world, we'd actually rather have you trying to assimilate and deal with the Chinese and the Indians.
And are there any black chess champions? Or have any of the world chess champions been black?
No, I mean there is a gap, like in terms of top play. There are good black chess players. There are chess masters. There are chess black grandmasters, but just like females, there is a gap, and it's disputed among scholars. Obviously it's a very controversial topic, but that's in Lynn's book and these various things like the exceptional performance of Jews. Note, although it's interesting that Nigerians, did you read that article on the UNS report about the Nigerian Scrabble champion? So I noticed that Nigerians are actually quite good at chess. So there's not like level where there's like a Nigerian chess champ, but like relative to even European nations on a whole, that like Nigeria produces about as good chess players maybe Eastern European countries or something. If you had to look at it, I'm not sure if you saw that article on UNS talking about Scrabble, and I think that Nigeria for years has been producing some of the best Scrabble players in the world.
Oh, interesting. No, I didn't see that. Okay, I'm going to move on. Any final words for today, Dovid?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I thought it was an interesting topic, just because it, like turning to the censorship and, at this point, you don't even know where the arrows are coming, and to ally that they would, be taking the side of a get refuser to censor the rabbis, which makes sense in the case that it probably was a violation of terms. But yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation today, and, blessings, and thanks for having me on as usual.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Dovid. I'm going to put up a map of households in Los Angeles who make an income over $150,000 a year. So non-Hispanic whites in Los Angeles, they were 29% of the population in 2010 compared to 86.3% of the population in 1950. So the majority of the non-Hispanic white population lives near the Pacific coast and near or on the Santa Monica Mountains. Now, Hispanics are about 32%. Hispanics are about 66% of the Los Angeles population. The black population's under 10%, and it's been steadily dropping. Asians are 11%. So what? Blacks are 10%, Asians are 11%, whites are 29%, and then most of the rest are Hispanic. So yeah, about 50% Hispanic. Okay, dokie. Let me play something here from Fox News.
Chris Harrison won't host the next Bachelorette, despite apologizing twice for defending contestant Rachel Kirkconnell after she was accused of racially insensitive behavior. If you don't watch the show, congratulations. But Kirkconnell is white, currently trying to marry the black male star, making her a pretty lame racist. Meanwhile, an inner circle of hell called The Talk is shutting down for a few days to investigate a conversation when co-host Sharon Osbourne defended Piers Morgan over Meghan Markle.
I feel even like I'm about to be put in the electric chair because I have a friend who many people think is a racist, so that makes me a racist. Tell me, when you have heard him say racist things, educate me.
I don't want anybody here to watch this and say that we're attacking you for being racist.
I think that seed's already sown.
Osbourne's co-host Cheryl Underwood said Sharon was giving validation to something he, Morgan, has uttered that is racist. What was said that was racist? Dumb question. Doesn't matter. In a moral panic, evidence becomes unnecessary. All one needs is the accusation to burn the witch. Just to note, the controversial discussion was on air. So why investigate it when you can just watch it? That's also part of the moral panic. We must do something now, or we will be next in the barrel. It makes me wonder, just by doing this monologue in which I appear to defend Osbourne, must I be investigated for giving validation to a validation of a person accused of racism? And if anyone here agrees with me, do they then merit an investigation for validating my validation of Sharon's validation of a person accused? And what about you, dear viewer? If you agree with me, then you're validating me. And I didn't even drive here. Remember, it's not about being racist. It's the power one gets making the accusation. The power is zero-sum. One can only move forward if another is canceled. Remember the Red Scare? This is the race scare. It rewards as it punishes. And if you don't think you're next, then you aren't paying attention. Now I gotta run. I have to pee. Don't take my seat. All right, Dana, I want to play for you. We're all going to end up having to apologize sooner or later for something, so just get your apology letter ready. And I think I came across the best one I've ever heard. Okay. Scott Adams has created an apology letter that we can all use. And I urge you to find it. Here's a snippet.
I'm a deeply flawed human. really just a pile of organic crap that is barely sentient. I must learn to listen and do better. I am committed to doing the hard work of examining all of my flaws, as described by my critics, and I will force myself to be unhappy until my brain is free of all bias. I am committed to a path of self-improvement that will, with lots of hard work, make me barely acceptable to proper thinking people. I dedicate my entire life to the mission of pleasing my critics. I plan to issue public statements of apology for being me until the end of my days, which I think we all agree should come sooner than later.
I think that if everybody has that in their back pocket, we will all be fine, Dana.
But the thing is, Chris Harrison from The Bachelor, he did that.
Yes.
He basically said all of that, and he actually said it with more feeling.
Yes.
And like authenticity. He was like trying to bring it across, and it didn't work for him. I have a friend who watches The Bachelorette, or The Bachelor, whatever it is. I asked him about this. He sent me 8 paragraphs of how he feels about it. And he's not happy, and he said that it's supposed to be like mindless viewing, but now it's no longer that, and he thinks that it probably won't do as well.
Yeah. Katie, I want to play you another clip from The Talk. This is one of the other co-hosts talking about Piers Morgan. Let's go.
People feel that he's racist. People have receipts. I wish we had them today so that we could actually go deeper into this conversation so people could see why people feel that he's racist and sexist. I mean, there's a lot, but we don't have those receipts here.
You know, there's a lot. I mean, there's these receipts, right? But I don't really need to bring them. When I'm accusing somebody of racism, I can just say we have the receipts. This is the new McCarthyism, Katie. You don't even need the receipts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's called The Talk, but if Sharon Osbourne wants to actually talk about it, she's not allowed to, and they cancel the show for a few days. There are receipts that they're not bringing to the conversation despite knowing that they're going to have this conversation. And if you go back a few steps to look at where this conversation came from on The Talk, it came from Piers Morgan criticizing Meghan Markle, and then the co-host of The Talk saying they feel as if he is racist. The thing he was criticizing was said by Meghan Markle also didn't have evidence. She claimed that someone in the royal family said something about her son's skin color, but wouldn't say who it was. So all of this has no evidence and no receipts. It's all accusation, and it boils down to this awful situation where we're no longer able to judge anybody by their character or by maybe their flaws, but they can get over them. We have to boil it down to you either like someone based on their race or you dislike them based on their race. And that's a really gross place to be.
Yeah, you know, Juan, Katie brings up a really good point about the whole racism controversy began with just one story from Meghan Markle in which she actually smeared not just royalty, but her actual in-laws. She said her entire in-laws are all racist because she won't say which one over a story that she wouldn't even discuss with them. She wouldn't even talk about whether or not they meant it was racist or not. What kind of person would smear their in-laws completely by saying, well, they asked this really bad question, so I'm going to tell Oprah about it to millions of people? That's kind of rotten.
I think not acknowledging race requires people to look away, and I think.
Oh God, I can't take any more.
She is Camille Paglia. Her official title is Professor of Humanities and Media Studies at the University of the Arts in Philadelphia. It's a collection of her essays on art, feminism, politics, sex, and education. It's titled Provocations. It is up at DennisPrager.com. Camille Paglia, welcome to my show.
Thanks for having me on, Dennis.
Well, to say the least, you've earned it. You should be on every show, in my opinion. Whenever I read you, I wonder how do you get away with saying things that the left would otherwise have you removed from public discourse for?
Well, I've been attacked since the moment I came on the scene, which was in 1990 with my first book, Sexual Persona. I mean, the attacks on me were unrelenting. Gloria Steinem was comparing me to a Nazi. You know, I was practically every major TV show I was being defamed on. So I'm kind of used to it. I'm a warrior.
You certainly are. And where would you put your? I regard you. So this will help my listeners, but it may not help you. But I regard you as a liberal, and every day I make a distinction between liberal and left. Do you think that that's a fair statement?
Yes, I am a classical liberal. That is, I uphold individualism and freedom, and I oppose the bloated bureaucracy and administrative overreach and overexpansion of government.
Right, which is what liberals used to do, like Daniel Patrick Moynihan and John F. Kennedy and many others. Okay, so at least people will understand in that regard.
And I feel I'm also libertarian insofar as I take positions that are not palatable to conservatives. Like I support prostitution and defend pornography and so on within limits.
Right, I understand. That would be a libertarian position. I actually announced that I have ambivalence on the legalization of prostitution issue. I am torn about it because A, I have a libertarian streak in that regard. B, it's done a lot of harm, in my opinion, by keeping prostitution in the underworld and allowing for trafficking. But anyway, we'll leave that aside for now. Okay, so I have a question. Am I right when I attack feminist organizations for not defending the girls and women who are now being defeated routinely in sports by male bodies saying that they're female?
Well, yes, and there are many feminists in England